the key point here, which again, the mainstream media won't pay attention to, which is Russia actually claimed to have had very negative and derogatory information about Hillary Clinton. That if they had chosen to release that in the weeks leading up to that November 2016 election, it would have very likely had a devastating.
The moment Tulsi Gabbard locked her gaze on Hillary Clinton, it felt like watching a seasoned surgeon prepare for a precise operation. Scalpel in hand, every move deliberate, measured, and without a trace of excess. Hillary, on the other hand, has spent her career seemingly vying for the title of history's most misunderstood villain, always playing the part with the intensity of a Shakespearean tragedy. Tulsi, however, has this rare ability to cut through the murky haze of political doublespeak with surgical precision, effortlessly dismantling the endless web of contradictions and drama surrounding Hillary. And when it comes to Hillary, there's no shortage of material to work with.
In fact, this report shows Putin held back from leaking compromising material on Hillary Clinton prior to the election, instead planning to release it after the election to weaken what Moscow viewed as an inevitable Clinton presidency. In the January 2017 intelligence community assessment that President Obama ordered, John Brennan, who was CIA director at the time, and the intelligence community intentionally suppressed intelligence that showed Putin was saving the most damaging material that he had in his possession about.
Gabbard doesn't even need to stretch the truth. Hillary Clinton practically does the work for her. Every time Hillary attempts to reshape her legacy, it feels like watching a masterclass in self-sabotage. Clinton's career reads like a long, drawn-out infomercial on how to fail upward. From First Lady to Senator, to Secretary of State, to presidential hopeful, Hillary has somehow touched every level of the political ladder. Yet, each step seems accompanied by a trail of scandals, missteps, and moments so cringeworthy, they'd end any other politician's career. But not Hillary. Somehow, she always lands on her feet.
That essentially the documents that Russia claimed they had portrayed Hillary Clinton as having mental health challenges that would result in fits of laughter and fits of rage. It also pointed out some very specific physical health concerns that apparently leaders within the DNC were discussing amongst each other.
That's right. This wasn't invented intelligence like the Steele dossier. This was supposedly emails within the DNC.
And communication.
Hillary treats political scandal the way a cat treats knocking things off the counter, with a mix of casual indifference and unapologetic mischief. It's almost a sport for her, expected, even. And when anyone dares to call her out, she acts as though she's the victim. Tulsi Gabbard, however, takes this entire narrative, flips it on its head, and exposes it for what it truly is, a tale of someone who's been handed every opportunity on a silver platter, only to fumble each one like a quarterback with buttered hands. Hillary's been entrenched in politics longer than most voters have been alive, yet her most notable achievement appears to be proving that, sometimes, sheer name recognition is enough to keep a career on life support.
To great detail about the information that Russia and Putin had on Hillary Clinton, which included possible criminal acts, like secret meetings with multiple named U.S. religious organizations in which State Department officials offered, in exchange for supporting Secretary Clinton's campaign for the presidency, significant increases in financing from the state.
Consider the infamous 2016 election. The Democrats had everything on their side: money, media support, the cultural elites, and Hillary's ultimate weapon, a Rolodex filled with high-powered connections. And yet, she somehow lost to Donald Trump, the very man the media had declared unelectable. That loss wasn't just a political defeat, it was the Super Bowl of political blunders. Tulsi drives this home, pointing out that Hillary didn't just falter at the finish line. She tripped, face planted, and then blamed the track for being uneven. But Hillary's defeat wasn't a random fluke. It was the result of years of missteps, miscalculations, and a deeply flawed campaign that no amount of power or influence could save.
November 2016 election. The fact is, the opposite is true. It was intentionally withheld and not released because they assumed that Hillary Clinton would win that election. And their plan, according to these documents that were found in an investigation the House Intelligence Committee conducted into the CIA's creation of this January 20.
It was the climax of decades of arrogance and tone deafness. Tulsi doesn't need to raise her voice. She lets the facts speak for themselves. Hillary treated the Rust Belt like a mere sightseeing spot, not a vital voting bloc. She dismissed working-class Americans as an afterthought, all while soaking up the glitter of Hollywood fundraisers. She carried herself like the presidency was her birthright, not something that needed to be earned. And when voters dared to challenge her, she had the gall to label them deplorable, a move that only further alienated those she should have been fighting for.
Also had documents that showed the patronage of the State Department to State Department employees who would go and support Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. There were high-level DNC emails that detailed evidence of Hillary's, quote, psycho-emotional problems, uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, and that then Secretary Clinton was allegedly on a daily regimen of...
Tulsi slices through that moment like a hot knife through butter because it perfectly encapsulates Hillary's sense of entitlement. She couldn't even begin to comprehend that regular people might not want to hand her the keys to the Oval Office. This isn't just a misstep, it's the embodiment of who she is, someone so out of touch that she believes the presidency is owed to her, not something to be earned. Then there's Hillary's time as Secretary of State, which, for Tulsi, is little more than a buffet of blunders. Take Benghazi, for instance. It's not just a word, it's a permanent stain on her legacy. Americans died under her watch, and her response? A mix of excuses, deflections, and a chilling air of condescension. Sitting before Congress, she dodged accountability with the smugness of someone who truly believes that the rules don't apply to her. For Tulsi, a combat veteran, that level of detachment isn't just a political failure, it's personal. And let's not forget the email scandal. A saga that epitomizes Hillary's decades-long approach to transparency and accountability. Wiping servers, deleting emails, setting up private systems that read like a spy novel gone wrong, Hillary somehow turned nothing to hide into a punchline, further cementing her reputation for secrecy and disregard for the truth.
Foreign policy has been a disaster for our country and the world. It's resulted in the deaths and injuries of so many of my brothers and sisters in uniform. It's devastated entire countries, millions of lives lost. Yet, despite this damage that you have done to our country and the world, you want to continue your failed policies, directly or indirectly through the Democratic...
Hillary treated security protocols like mere suggestions, optional checkboxes to be ignored because, well, she was Hillary. Tulsi pulls back the curtain on this, revealing it for what it truly was, arrogance masquerading as convenience. The same arrogance that eroded her trustworthiness, shredded her credibility, and ultimately cost her the White House. The irony of Hillary Clinton is that, for decades, she's presented herself as a champion of women's rights. Yet, Tulsi reveals how her actions paint a starkly different picture. Hillary has wielded feminism like a prop, not a guiding principle. She paraded herself as a glass ceiling breaker, but only when it served her ambitions. Tulsi expertly dissects this facade, pointing out the glaring hypocrisy of someone who preaches empowerment, but practices suppression when it's politically advantageous. And then there's Bill Clinton. Hillary has hauled his baggage around like a Louis Vuitton suitcase with a broken handle, clunky, heavy, and impossible to ignore. No matter how much she tries to rebrand herself or distance from his scandals, she can't escape the shadow of his past mistakes. The weight of his misdeeds has been tied to her every step, and no amount of rebranding can wipe that slate clean.
That the Democratic Party leaders, people like Hillary Clinton, people who've been in charge for a very long time, foment this kind of culture of fear and like, hey, if you go against us, like, you're dead, 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 you're dead.
The Monica Lewinsky scandal, the endless parade of accusations, the circus in the Oval Office, it all hangs like a shadow over Hillary's political narrative. Tulsi doesn't need to harp on it for long. She simply points out the fact that Hillary's political career has always been inextricably linked to cleaning up Bill's messes, or at least spinning them into something less toxic. Rather than standing as an independent political figure, Hillary's rise to power has always been wrapped in the Clinton brand, which often seems more about survival than true public service. But it doesn't stop there. Hillary's foreign policy record is another rich vein for Tulsi to mine. From her full-throated support for the Iraq War to her disastrous push for regime change in Libya, Hillary has left a legacy of chaos in her wake. Tulsi, having served on the front lines, calls out Hillary's hawkish tendencies with the authority of someone who's seen the brutal consequences of reckless interventions firsthand. Hillary, on the other hand, has treated war like a game of risk, moving pieces around, toppling dictators, and acting surprised when the entire region collapses into chaos. Libya didn't just crumble after Gaddafi, it devolved into a failed state, a breeding ground for terrorism and a humanitarian nightmare. And yet, Hillary smirked in front of the cameras, seemingly proud of the havoc she'd helped unleash. Tulsi makes this contrast crystal clear, highlighting the difference between genuine sacrifice and Hillary's flippant, disastrous foreign policy misadventures.
It's time for you to acknowledge the damage that you've caused. And it is long past time for you to step down from your throne so that the Democratic Party can lead with a new foreign policy, which will actually be in the interest of and benefit to the American people and the world.
Joining us now with reaction, Congresswoman, 2020 Democratic candidate, war veteran herself, Tulsi Gabbard. Congresswoman, first, thank you for serving your country. And
perhaps Tulsi's most devastating strike lands on Hillary's utter inability to accept responsibility. Every failure, every scandal, every setback is always someone else's fault. The Russians, James Comey, sexism, the media, the Electoral College. Hillary has blamed everyone and everything except herself. Tulsi expertly exposes this endless blame game, highlighting it as the behavior of someone who believes she's perpetually above reproach. Hillary Clinton embodies everything Americans claim to despise about politics, corruption, entitlement, double standards, and the never-ending cycle of failed leadership. Tulsi shatters the myth of Hillary's political inevitability, revealing that she isn't a symbol of progress, but a figure of stagnation. Hillary is the embodiment of an establishment that values power over principle, connections over competence, and excuses over accountability. In Tulsi's hands, Hillary's carefully crafted narrative crumbles, showing her for what she truly is, a leader who has ridden on the coattails of her family's influence and never been held accountable for the consequences of her actions.
Hillary Clinton like. You're probably the only person in this room who would know.
It wouldn't surprise you to know that she's not too fond of me.
She hates you like the devil hates holy water.
So, when I resigned as vice chair of the DNC in 2016, specifically so that I could campaign against Hillary Clinton in that Democratic primary.
What makes Tulsi's takedown of Hillary so devastating is the precision of her delivery. She doesn't rely on shouting or grandstanding to make her point. Instead, she methodically lays out the facts, brick by brick, until the entire carefully constructed facade of Hillary's image comes crumbling down under its own weight. For decades, Hillary has tried to craft a legacy built on strength, perseverance, and resilience. But Tulsi reveals the truth behind the facade, a politician who has ridden the wave of privilege, stumbled through leadership, and clung desperately to relevance by recycling the same old excuses. Hillary Clinton wanted to be remembered as the first female president, a groundbreaking trailblazer. Instead, thanks to Tulsi, she will likely be remembered as the woman who had every possible advantage, every opportunity handed to her, and still managed to lose to Donald Trump. And the more Hillary tries to reinsert herself into the political conversation, through books, documentaries, speaking tours, and cryptic teases about another run, the more Tulsi's unrelenting dismantling of her credibility resonates. Each reappearance is a painful reminder that Hillary can't move on, can't face the uncomfortable truth that her moment has long passed. Tulsi doesn't need to scream over her or twist the knife. All she has to do is hold up a mirror, and Hillary's own record does all the damage.
That's exactly right.
What do you know about
If you
that?
remember when we go back and Hillary Clinton's emails were really making headlines in a lot of ways and for a lot of reasons.
Her missing emails.
Yes, exactly. And so when people look at the newly declassified Durham appendix, you'll see a number of quite shocking statements in there coming from people like then DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, talking about how, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Hillary Clinton's emails were deleted just in time.
At the end of the day, Tulsi Gabbard doesn't just take aim at Hillary Clinton. She dismantles the very mythology that surrounds her. She peels back the layers of spin, the endless excuses, and the failed reinventions, revealing the truth beneath. What remains isn't the fearless feminist icon or the master strategist Hillary desperately strives to be seen as. What's left is a politician whose career reads like a case study in failure, whose legacy is built on a series of missteps, and whose greatest contribution to history will be showing that no amount of power, influence, or media support can overcome one simple truth: you can't sell what the people aren't buying. Tulsi leaves the door wide open, knowing Hillary will inevitably attempt another comeback. And every time she does, it gives Tulsi even more ammunition to expose the myths, further unravel the narrative, and spotlight the hypocrisy. Tulsi doesn't just highlight these flaws, she methodically lays them bare, showing how Hillary's relentless pursuit of relevance only underscores what she's lost: trust, credibility, and most importantly, the momentum that once made her seem like the reformist future of politics. In every failed attempt at revival, Hillary only reinforces the growing gap between her image and the reality of her political trajectory.
I was at, I think it was the first debate, the first primary debate that they had, first or second. It was one of the early ones. And I was doing an interview with MSNBC outside the hall of the debate. I think it was in Miami. And I don't remember who the host was, but I could see them and hear them in my ear. And they said, "Tulsi Gabbard, you're coming out and criticizing Hillary Clinton and her foreign policy record. Aren't you afraid of what she'll do to you?" He asked me this on live television on MSNBC. And you're laughing. I laughed too. I was like, no, I am not afraid of what Hillary Clinton...
Hillary Clinton's political career has had every tool imaginable at its disposal. Name recognition? Check. A vast donor network? Check. A loyal media class ready to amplify her every move? Check. An establishment brand that seemed to guarantee her success? Check. Yet, time and again, she's used these advantages not to push boundaries or challenge the status quo, but to prop herself up. Tulsi Gabbard drives home the painful irony: a woman with so many resources, yet so little to show for it in terms of progress. Not in policy, not in discourse, not in advancing society. Tulsi's critique lands like a punch. Hillary's platform wasn't about changing the game, it was about preserving the power of those who've always held it. The most damning part of Tulsi's dismantling is the stark contrast between authenticity and artifice. Hillary, with her polished talking points, rehearsed speeches, and political conditioning, is the epitome of the system. She represents the machine. Tulsi, on the other hand, speaks from a place of lived experience. As a soldier, she brings real-world stakes to the table. She's willing to confront the painful truths that Hillary has spent her career avoiding because she has faced the consequences of policy decisions firsthand. This isn't just political opposition, it's a generational divide. On one side, the polished politician, enscathed by the realities of the world she shapes. On the other, a wounded patriot demanding accountability, unafraid to go where it hurts. Hillary has spent decades claiming she understands the grassroots, that she understands struggle, that she gets it. Tulsi stands in defiance, fatigued but fearless, telling truth to power without a hint of political convenience. If the question is who represents the future, someone who seeks to recalibrate a broken system, or someone who's spent her lifetime preserved by it, the answer is clear.